So hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And I'm talking about Joe Rogan's guest, Tom O'Neill. And off the bat, I have to say this was one episode that I really wanted to watch from start to finish. Basically, it covered some stuff that Tom O'Neill is the author of a book about the Charles Manson murders. And it might seem, well, okay, that's old hash, it's stuff that happened a while ago, who's interested in that? It seems that Charles Manson may have been a part of the government's mind control experiments. That's what it seems like. Apparently, he was on parole for a particular crime, and he broke his parole. He broke the parole requirements several times, I think, and still he was allowed out. He was not put back into prison. And the reason for that is because he seems to have been connected to people who were part of the government's LSD mind control experiments that the CIA was illegally running in the US. Now, this seems like, the regular run-of-the-mill conspiracy theory stuff that Joe Rogan might normally find himself in. But this person is, like I said, somebody who's been writing this book and had no initial interest in the subject. But he's been writing it for 20 years. And pretty much everything that he says, what we know for a fact, is stuff that he has been able to corroborate. And he's really careful with his words. He's like, I want to make sure and only say directly speak to the stuff that I have evidence for. And some of the things that he has evidence for are just some crazy stuff. Like I said, that Charles Manson probably should have been in prison. For some reason, government, federal authorities were basically allowing him to come out. And part of the reason seems to be that he and his followers would visit a clinic that was run by, well, not run, or at least had connections to the government's CIA mind control experiments. And it's also alleged that for one of the people who were convicted in the murders of those people, that Quentin Tarantino made a movie, and he made it to his desire, which in some ways is satisfying. I don't know if you remember Inglourious Bastards, where at the end of it the guy kills Hitler. So it's a reimagined way of how things could have turned out. And of course, instead of the people getting murdered, the stunt guy is able to completely thwart the killer's plans and kill them instead. So it's on a similar subject, and apparently it's been, it's going to be 50 years, I think, because at the time when he was first, it's a strange story, and as he says, he was never really interested in doing something on the subject. But let me just go back to some of the things that were interesting to me. For one thing, apparently, what the motive for the killings was supposed to be, as told by Charles Manson to his followers, but apparently he did not believe it. And this is not part of the conspiracy. This is apparently part of the government record. That's what they suggest. That's the reason why he had the people killed, is that he was trying to start a race war by killing people who were in some way connected to the left and liberal ideas and supporting the Black Panthers And the Black Panthers, supposedly, according to what Charles Manson was telling his followers, they would have been set up for the crime. The police would start to investigate them and pressure them more. And it was supposed to lead to a race war that Charles Manson had heard about in songs by the Beatles. It had come to him as a prophecy. This is what he was telling his followers. And in the ensuing race war, and this is where it gets crazier and crazier, black people were supposedly going to win out. I don't know how that was going to happen, seeing as 13% of the population in the US are black. I don't know how they were going to kill 60 to 80 something percent of the population. That's kind of silly. But after they won, during the time when the race war was supposed to be going on, Charles Manson would lead his followers deep underground in order to survive the war. And then they would come back out after the black people had won, and they would repopulate the earth, and they would lead the black people, because the black people were not intelligent enough to run things on their own. So Charles Manson and his followers, they were going to do it, to lead them. So I had never heard of this crazy thing, but that's apparently a part of the actual record. But what some of the incriminating things that were discussed in the book were that, for a fact, apparently, a number of prosecutors and prosecuting witnesses, I think they lied in the case. And it's been well established by the guy, by the author, that they lied in their testimony in a capital case. And apparently, if you do that, you personally, for your perjury, can be tried for a capital crime. And you can potentially end up in a similar situation, to be on, death row, is it? And he was saying that he was sad that by the time he got concrete evidence of the fact that these people had perjured themselves, many of them were dead. The actual prosecutor in the case, apparently he was a complete and utter nut. For example, and that was the idea, the contention is that he had a lot of, he owed his superiors a lot of help because they saved his career, and as a result, it would have been easy to manipulate him. This is the kind of things, for example, that he did that he would have owed them for. Apparently, before he ever got onto the case, his wife had a kid, and he thought that the mailman was the father. So he had the mailman followed and basically messed with the guy's life completely, to the point where his daughter said that he had a mental breakdown as a result of it. The daughter says, and this was not in the book, that one day the prosecutor picked her up, took her shopping to buy any toys that she wanted, then dropped her back off at her house with all these toys. She was 5 years old, and her mother is like, come in the house, come in the house. The prosecutor's wife basically was begging the mailman after he stopped working, coincidentally. And that was enough for the guy to fuel his ire, and for him to be certain that it was the mailman that was the father of the kid, and he wanted to get a blood test done. And apparently this went on for years. He sent them anonymous letters, anonymous calls. When they changed their number, he sent them letters to say, oh, you changed your number. That was nice. His wife went to their house to beg them to just admit to the fact that it was that the mailman was the guy's, it was the father of the child. And at the end of it, apparently the mailman and his wife and his family were able to get to the guy's superiors. and have them like arranged to have the case settled, like they got a payment or whatever. But then suddenly after that, after his superiors quashed the case and everything, he is on one of the biggest case that, the author was saying that the only case that was ever bigger than that from then to now was like the O.J. Simpson trial. So you can imagine how crazy this would have been at the time. But what is interesting, like I mentioned at the onset, was that Charles Manson would take his followers to this clinic, and there were people there who have like recorded correspondence as to when they would start experimenting on people at the clinic. And they wanted to make sure it was people who nobody would really be too concerned about. And that's why they basically were trying to infiltrate the hippie movement, the flower child movement, and try to get these people to be used as assassins. And what's the name of this particular? Apparently, it was both the FBI and the CIA, but it's the CIA that was more closely involved with Manson. What was interesting is that the guy was saying that after he spent 20 years of, gathering all of this evidence, when the book was released last year, he expected to have a flurry of people, threatening to sue, because they did when he was investigating for his book. But nobody looked to sue. He thought, maybe somebody's going to pick up on the evidence that he laid out in the book, and maybe reporters were going to investigate the stuff, and maybe somebody was going to say, no, you're full of BS, but nothing like that. Nothing happened. It just it was, apparently the book sold well, but it was not on the level that he thought that it would have happened. There was much more excitement, I suppose, around Quentin Tarantino's movie, but it was as if the people who he was accusing of all of these things, all of the players in it, the prosecutors, the scientists who actually experimented on people, everybody just wanted to not make any move whatsoever so as to draw any attention to the book. And honestly, it seems to have worked. If this guy was not on Joe Rogan's podcast, I have never heard of this before. I've never heard of the book before. And I don't know what you may think in terms of how I view conspiracy theories, but normally I just cast them aside. I think they're crap for the most part. But this one, the guy was very particular. He was very worried and concerned that everything that he was saying, hey, this is what happened, that he was saying it exactly how he was supposed to be saying it, based on the evidence that he had gathered. Anything that was actual speculation, he was saying, well, this is my speculation. And I thought, well, okay, this guy is actually... Now, with respect to the FBI and the CIA, their operations to try to create Manchurian candidates, people who they could program to assassinate or send messages or whatever. There have been congressional hearings on that in the US, and the people have admitted that they were part of the program to do this kind of thing. So this is not something that's way out to say, well, it never happened. No, they have admitted that it happened, and the CIA was saying, and of course nobody apparently was ever convicted or even like punished for doing this kind of thing, which was illegal, but they're saying that they never were able to achieve anything. But the author, Tom O'Neill, is suggesting that there was a murder, for example, of a guy murdered a young child, a 3-year-old, and he was saying that, he'd blacked out and he couldn't remember what happened, and that was involving some people. For example, in his case, one of the people who was in the program, they interjected themselves into the guy's case. With respect to the guy who killed Oswald, the person who killed Kennedy, that person, at some point, he became irretrievably insane. And someone who was also in that, involved in, actually, I think it was either the person's dissertation or something that they were studying, was how to make somebody mentally insane without them knowing. That was something that that person was involved in. And then when they became involved in a case with Oswald's killer, this person, one day they were fine, the next day they seemed to be irretrievably mentally insane. So all of these things, he paints a lot of provides a lot of leads, potential leads, and he doesn't have an airtight idea as to how things happened, and he wishes he could have. But I feel, honestly, it was a very interesting podcast, I have to say. But, I gotta end this. This is going a little bit too long. So, wish me luck. You can like or unlike. You can comment, subscribe, and or share. Peace.